Mr. John Oakhurst, gambler, stepped into the main street of Poker Flat on the morning of the 23rd of November, 1850, and was conscious of a change in its moral atmosphere since the preceding night. 2 or 3 men conversed earnestly in the corner. The loungers by the saloon door regarded him with a certain pointed hostility. He was, so to speak, the target of unfriendly eyes. He had reason to think himself in some danger, and he was a man not easily frightened. A secret committee had determined to rid the town of all improper persons. This was done permanently in regard to 2 men who had recently lost their lives, and temporarily in the banishment of certain other objectionable characters. Among the latter was Mr. Oakhurst, who was instructed to leave Poker Flat by noon that same day, along with the Duchess, Mother Shipton, and a jovial drunkard known as Uncle Billy. They were furnished with provisions and horses and escorted to the edge of town under armed guard. As the escort disappeared, their pent-up feelings found vent in a few hysterical tears from the Duchess, some bad language from Mother Shipton, and a Parthian volley of expletives from Uncle Billy. Mr. Oakhurst alone remained silent. He did not drink. It interfered with a profession which required coolness, impassiveness, and presence of mind. And, in his own language, he could not afford it. The road to Sandy Bar, a camp that lay over the divide, was steep and difficult. Mr. Oakhurst surveyed the surroundings gravely and decided to rest there for the night. As he made a fire and the others disposed themselves about it, the sound of a horse's hooves came down the trail. Presently, a young man and a young woman appeared. Tom Simpson and Piney Woods, the innocent and his 15-year-old companion, were eloping from Sandy Bar. They greeted the outcasts with cheerful innocence, and without quite understanding why, the party decided to share the camp for the night. The innocent, with the help of Piney, quickly established a comfortable, rude camp. A few pine boughs formed a roof above a rough framework of branches. The Duchess, touched perhaps by the high altitude and the clean mountain air, for the first time in weeks, found herself without the stimulant she had relied upon. It was her first attempt at a virtue, and it was not entirely successful. Piney Woods, who was apparently unaware of the true nature of her companions, brought a warmth and brightness to the camp that was difficult to resist. She and the Duchess sat together by the fire while Tom played the accordion. Mr. Oakhurst smoked his pipe in thoughtful silence. He had calculated with some care that the provisions were meager, that the snow was coming, and that the shortest road back to Poker Flat was longer than any of the party could now travel on foot. He said nothing of this to the others when daylight came. The party found themselves buried in snow. It had fallen steadily through the night. Looking over the white level where the trail had been, Mr. Oakhurst knew the issue was settled. He fashioned a pair of snowshoes and pressed them on Tom Simpson. The young man must go ahead to Poker Flat for help, and quickly, for the provisions would not last long. Uncle Billy, in the night, had stolen the mules and most of the provisions and vanished into the storm. Mr. Oakhurst said nothing about Uncle Billy to the women. He told them simply that Tom had gone for assistance and that he himself would follow a different trail. He left the remaining provisions carefully divided. Standing at the edge of camp, watching Tom disappear over the white ridge, Oakhurst felt something he could not quite name. Perhaps perhaps the first honest feeling he had permitted himself in many years. Then he returned to the shelter. The women waited. Days passed. The two were drawn together by necessity, and by something finer than necessity. Piney brought the same gentle spirit to their little cabin as she had brought to their first campfire, and the Duchess found herself responding to it in ways she would not have thought possible. They read to each other from the small collection of books that Tom had left behind, among them a volume concerning the deeds of the Iliad's heroes, and Piney called Mr. Oakhurst a Trojan, which made him smile in his grave way. The fire grew smaller as wood became harder to find. The food grew short. Mother Shipton, who had eaten least of all and concealed her sacrifice, slipped away one morning and did not wake again. She had starved herself to save the others. Mr. Oakhurst laid her out in the snow with a decency that was almost ceremonial and returned to tend the fire without comment. When the wood was nearly gone and the fire was very low, the Duchess and Piney lay down together under the pine boughs, huddled close for warmth. The Duchess drew the younger woman near and covered her as best she could. Sleep came upon them both. Piney with the innocence of one who has done no wrong, the Duchess with the peace of one who has at last done right. The snow sifted down over them, covering their forms gently, erasing all distinction of rank or reputation. And there in the cold and the silence, sleeping side by side, even an observer with an eye for such things could not have said which was the woman of virtue and which was the outcast. Outside, the forest stood still. The fire was a memory of warmth, and somewhere in the trees, Mr. Oakhurst waited alone, tending to one last act of accounting before the morning came for him too. At the camp's edge, the rescuers from Poker Flat found a pine tree bearing a playing card, the deuce of clubs, pinned to its bark. On it, in the careful hand of a man who had spent his life calculating odds, were the words, "Beneath this tree lies the body of John Oakhurst, who struck a streak of bad luck on the 23rd of November, 1850, and handed in his checks on the 7th of December, 1850. He had taken his own life with a derringer, having first ensured that what food and warmth remained went to the women. Beneath the snow, the rescuers found the Duchess and Piney, cold and still, locked in each other's arms. They were so peaceful and so alike in their repose that the men removed their hats. Thus, in the care of Father Pute, they slept. The strongest and weakest of the outcasts of Poker Flat had met at last on equal ground, and rested there together